Good afternoon and welcome to Poison Pen for another interview. Today we have a very interesting story and a little bit out of our normal wheelhouse. We have the book 24, Life Stories and Lessons from the Shea Kid by Willie Mays and our guest, John Shea. John is a columnist with the San Francisco Chronicle, award-winning columnist with the San Francisco Chronicle, as well as a contributor at Major League Baseball, MLB Network. And John, how long have you been with sports writer?
Well, since college. In the early '80s, I graduated, so I've been at it ever since. And of course, back then there were many newspapers, many more than they have now. So the opportunities for a kid out of college was a little different than it is now. But I always had, luck was on my side. I worked at many different newspapers, and now I'm at the Chronicle. I was at the old San Francisco Examiner, and it merged with the Chronicle in 2000. So I've been covering baseball pretty much my whole life.
Wow. And how does one become a sports journalist? I mean, it doesn't even seem like work.
Hey, I can say the same for you, right? Come on. Shoot, passion. Willie Mays in the book talks all about passion. And if you don't have passion for something, you're probably not going to enjoy it. You might not be good at it. And I guess it starts there. The love of the game, the love of the written word, the love of the finished product. I mean, every day in the newspaper business is a daily miracle. And of course, now we're pushing a lot of online subscriptions versus the print, but it's a changing world and you got to adjust.
All right. Well, to get into the book, it's a little different for a sports book. I mean, it is, the numbers and the stats are there, but it's really about his life, his philosophy, his impact on the game and on society in general. I think I have a quote here from the forward, Bob Costas, and he said he has a strong case can be made for Willie to be baseball's greatest all-around player, and a few people have said that. Not just from playing, but also the entertainment value that he brought to the game, and the fact that you really had to be there to see it, and just the joy that was exuded when he played the game. And I think what I'd like to know, one is whose idea for the book? Did it come from Willie, or did you propose that he, after being with him for a number of years, that he looked at this?
Yeah, it's kind of a long time coming. 15 years ago, I first asked him about it. So we're talking 2005, 2006.
Wow.
And, his first reaction was, I'd like to have kids be able to read this. I'd like to have this in classrooms. I'd like to educate the young adults so that they can take the right road. I mean, obviously, Willie coming from the Deep South in the Jim Crow era and in poverty and, everything against him. And he just fought through, just an inspirational life, inspirational tale. But he wanted to inspire the next generation because his stories are being inspired by those who came before him, and he just wants to keep spreading what he believes in. I mean, he's led an exemplary life. He didn't smoke or drink, and he didn't you didn't see him starting fights in baseball, and you didn't see him at the bars late at night. Maybe a kid across the river, Mickey Mantle, did some of that, but as you know, growing up there. But it's just maybe a legacy book for Willie. It's really a time in his life he'd really like to share his stories, and not just the stories, but life lessons, as the title says.
And he does, and he uses those lessons. He uses actually his playing and his game as a way of explaining what he means by some of his lessons. And getting into the book itself, I think the greatest impact that I've been from reading the book on Willie was his father, and the way he was raised. He was literally a mean, you mentioned poverty, but when you read the book, he didn't think he was living in poverty. He had everything he needed, so there wasn't, the overbearing sense that he was, didn't have what he needed. But his father was basically his father, his friend, his teacher, his coach, and had a tremendous impact on him. And Willie, later life took care of him. Can you talk a little bit about that impact? Because I think he was 15 when Jackie Robinson broke in, and they both realized that he could make the major leagues. He could be a professional baseball player. He was at that point with the Negro League, but in the major leagues.
Yeah, Willie thought the Negro Leagues was as high as he was going to get, and he thought that was going to be great if he could make it. And certainly he did as a teenager with the legendary Birmingham Black Barons, which was right next door to his home in Fairfield, Alabama. And you're right. He had a roof. He had some friends. He had some ball fields, food. His aunts took care of him. His father, when he could, his father had so many jobs: a porter, worked in the mills, played ball himself to put some coins in his pocket to support his son. And Billy never forgot that, and said it was the most influential person in his life, and there were many of them. But Willie Howard Mays Sr. never forced the game of baseball on Junior, as he sometimes called Willie Jr. And he taught him the game. He played the game with him. He was young enough to actually be in the same outfield with some of these mill teams when Willie was just a kid.
Right.
And Willie never forgot what his father meant, and to this day speaks so highly. And there's a chapter in there only about Willie's relationship with his father, because the parents were so young when they had Willie, and Willie just always a happy. He never talks negatively about his youth. He said, it wasn't a black and white thing. Sometimes we'd go across the way and play with some white kids. And it's a segregated Birmingham, and the cops would come up and break up the game, which is just amazing to think about today. And then the cops would leave, and the black and white kids would keep playing, and it was all, and he kept that with them. I mean, Willie Mays is the great uniter and peacekeeper. If there were any fights on the field, Johnny Roseboro won Marichal, for instance, in the early '60s at Candlestick, when Marichal took a bat to the Dodger catcher's head, and blood everywhere. It was Mays who pulled Roseboro off the field, amid a sea of Dodger blue, of all people. Here's Willie Mays. But throughout his life, he was always doing that sort of stuff, and it always goes back to his dad, who told him, just do the right thing, take the right road. And he always kept in touch with Leo DeRocher and the folks, with the Black Barons to check in on Willie, because he was so darn young. He was 20 years old when he was playing center field for the New York Giants.
Right, I remember that. Yeah, when he came up.
Yeah. I should be interviewing you.
Well, I mean, the way I look at it, for those people who never had the privilege of watching Willie Mays play baseball, I'm sorry for your loss, because there was just it was evident every day. There was never a day off that you didn't know that he was playing. And I underscore the word playing. He was playing baseball. It wasn't a chore or a job, or he just loved what he was doing, and he was, through his father, he understood the game in and out. I mean, there wasn't anything he didn't understand, how to play. So
yeah, the 5 tools were basically invented for him. I mean, he could do it all at such a high level: the hitting, the hitting for power, the running, the defending, the throwing. And you could argue that one wasn't any less than the others. And I don't know if you could say that about anybody in today's game, because they were all at the highest level. And when I asked him once about that, I said, "What tool are you most proud of?" Because he hit 660 home runs, and he had 3,000 hits, and just a fantastic offensive player. And he said it was his defense that he was most proud of, because that's there every day. You could go for 4, but the defense can win games on a daily basis.
Right. No, he understood the game. Yeah, a lot of people, within the book, and people, we mentioned Joe Garagiola that we talked about. He said the same thing, that Willie Mays was the best all-around player. There might have been a few here and there that did one of those 5 tools better than him or equal to him, but I don't think anybody matched him on all 5. So, but he did come up in the segregated South and a racist. We're still living in a racist society, but when he was signed by the Giants and into the major leagues, he was playing in a segregated South still, and did suffer some overt racism coming up, as well as in San Francisco when he moved and tried to, but yet never let it make him bitter or turn. Always looking for something positive and winning over people with that attitude. The other thing I want to talk about, when he goes through the lessons, and he talks about playing for fun and for entertainment, and I think he brought that daily. But the thing I think that really made his reputation was, of course, the catch, which I did witness on TV.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, and in the '54 World Series, and he doesn't even consider that his greatest. I mean, there are a handful that he considers better and more important than that. And the old Polo Grounds was I don't know how they ever developed that ballpark. Whether it was, that's all the land they had, and they squeezed it in and made it that shape. But it was, and the interesting thing about that game, and I think you can read in the book, he makes that catch over his head, running away from home plate, some 460 feet from home plate, and gets the ball back, and controls the runner so they can't advance, or at least advance where they would do damage. But the game is actually won on a home run.
Yeah.
260 feet.
Yeah.
Home run. This guy hits the ball 460 feet. He gets nothing. Some guy late hits a 260-foot home run when the game, and then the series goes from there. The other thing I enjoyed in the book, because growing up in New York in that era, we had Mantle, Mays, and Snyder, and it was always, you were a Giant fan, a Yankee fan, or a Dodger fan. And I don't know why, but there was always a game on television in those days. Because if the Yankees were away, then the Giants were there. And the Dodgers, they didn't really care. They played their games on TV, even if the Yankee or Giant game was on. Well, not the Giant, the Yankees. So you get to see all 3 of those Hall of Famers. And he still, even though Mantle might have hit more for power, again, going back to those 5 tools, he seemed to just shine above them, and he had a bigger impact, although the Yankees were winning everything in those days. So the Giants never, after that '54, sort of disappeared for a while. So in the comparisons, and Bill James you have Bill James in the book, also quoting him as the greatest all-around baseball player. Although he himself probably doesn't admit to that kind of thing. I don't think he thinks about it. I know you mentioned something like he missed a couple of years the Army, so his 660 homers might have been 700. He might have probably caught Babe Ruth before in the era.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He missed 2 years in the military, 51 and 52, I'm sorry, 52 and 53. He came out in 54 and was the MVP of the National League, and ignited the Giants to the World Series, and that was really his breakout year. And those first 2 years out of the military, he hit 92 home runs. So imagine if he hit that many in the 2 years he missed, and conservatively say 60. Well, if he would have hit 60 in 52, 53, he finished with 660, and Babe Ruth had 714. So 660 plus 60 would have been 720. So, Willie could have been ahead of the Babe if not for the military. But again, like you say, he never looks at anything as a negative. He said, hey, I served my country. And, back then a lot of ball players were called in, Whitey Ford, Don Newcomb, Johnny Antonelli, Willie Mays, to kind of, inspire the troops and help morale by playing ball.
Right.
They fight like Ted Williams or Jerry Coleman or these, other, heroes. They served in their own way, and that's what the military wanted them to do, to play games to boost the morale of the troops. And that was right in Willie's wheelhouse, right? I mean, that his whole aspect of being an entertainer, and that's really what he was. You talk about the 5 tools. Shoot, I think he has more tools. The entertainment factor. I think he might be the most entertaining player in the history of the game. The durability. He played every game. There was a streak, Larry, of 150 games for 13 straight years. Nobody ever has done that before or since.
Wow.
So he never came out of the lineup. All-star games, spring training,
Right.
He played always. He played all the time. But again, going back to his passion, he loved the game. He wanted to play. He didn't want to come out.
Right. And that's highlighted in the book. Almost all of the chapters have a heading, and there's respect your peers, do the best you can, whatever the results are, as long as you know you did your best. And I think those are the life lessons he's trying to pass on. But when you follow his career, you realize that he was living those life lessons and that philosophy himself. This isn't just something, to put a book out or this is coming from his heart and the way he lives his life. And whether it's through his philanthropy, his Shea Foundation, whatever, he truly has an impact, and hopefully the book will be read by people who will understand and follow some of these things. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the 16-inning game with Spahn and Marshall, because that's something nobody will, you may talk about 800 home runs, whatever, but I don't think you'll ever see a game like that again. Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things you won't see ever again. You talk about the Polo Grounds. Nobody will make that catch again, because the Polo Grounds were 483 feet to dead center.
Right.
And you're right, 455, 460 feet, he made that catch. The biggest ballpark in the majors now is like 420 in Detroit. But so now you fast forward to that 16-inning game in San Francisco. Hank Aaron's Braves against Willie Mays' Giants, and Marshall and Spahn, dueling each other inning after inning, 0, 0, 0, 0. 13, 14, 15 innings, it's still 0-0. And the Giants manager, Alvin Dark, kept threatening to pull out Marshall, who was young. Spahn was in his 40s at the time, well on his way to, the Cooperstown. And finally, Marshall, after the top of the 16th, came off the field and waited for Mays. And Mays would always come over and step on first base as he, made his way to the first base dugout. So Juan was waiting for Willie, and he said, "Hey, Willie, you got to help me out, man. They're going to pull me. They're going to pull me from the game if we don't pull it out this inning." And Willie tells him, and both Juan and Willie tell me the story that is in the book. Says, "Okay, I'll take care of you." And then Willie Mays today says, "I didn't know I'd hit a damn home run," but sure enough, he goes up there, hits a home run, wins the game in the bottom of the 16th. And you got to remember, this is we talk about the Polo Grounds in Candlestick Park. These are two baseball facilities that never should have opened for baseball.
Right.
One because of the dimensions, the other because of the wind and the cold. I mean, right on the San Francisco Bay in the summer is just the worst place and time to play ball. And it was chilly, it was cold. Hank Aaron and Bud Selig told me how cold it was. They were both there that night. And I interviewed Spahn's son, who couldn't believe how cold it was. And, you know, you leave the hotel or you know, it's 75 degrees, you know, game time, it's 50. So, and then it goes down from there. So, yeah, Mays did everyone a favor except the Braves and Warren Spahn. You know, it was Spahn hung a screwball, and Mays pulled it. And you know, the wind at Candlestick, you had to pull the ball and hit a line drive in certain nights. If you hit a fly ball, it was going to blow foul. It was going to blow back onto the field. There's so many great stories about how you just can't hit a home run. The great thing about Mays, he didn't complain about the Polo Grounds. He learned how to pull the ball. Then he went to Candlestick and learned how to take the ball the other way, you know, the right center field jet stream. So instead of complaining about these things, he always adjusted to them and made it the best for him.
Yeah, I remember watching games on television in San Francisco. People looked like a football game. People were wearing parkers and blankets in the middle of June, you know. So yeah, that's.
Oh, the 49ers would play in the winter and it would be warmer.
Yeah.
You know, for what reason? And then the Giants would come out in the summer, it would be cold, and then play in the same facility. But even now, you know, I'm, you know, Bay Area kid. You know, I learned my lesson many times. Always bring the parka, even in the middle of summer. Right now, we're having a heat wave, and you know, I'm going out there today covering, you know, Giant games still during this pandemic, and you always overdress because you never know.
Even the new stadium.
The new stadium, yeah, it's good. It's right on the water. It's not as bad as Candlestick, not as windy, but you know, it can be just as foggy, sometimes just as cold. But the horror story of Candlestick, it doesn't even come close. That was amazing stuff. But Mays played most of his career. Willie McCovey. I mean, they had some great teams in San Francisco. They had the most wins in the 60s. Juan Marichal had the most wins among all pitchers in the 60s. It's just, you know, they got to the World Series in 62, but then they started finishing second every year and never really seemed to get over the hump until Bruce Bochy in the recent years.
Right.
3 championships in 5 years.
Yeah. I know later on he received criticism from Jackie Robinson for his efforts in the civil rights movement. And how did he deal with that?
Well, it's a great question because Jackie Robinson, who broke in with the Dodgers in his late 20s in 1947, you know, has a much different story than Willie Mays, who broke in with the Giants in 1951 at age 20, just a kid, a year removed from graduation from high school. And like I said, his father told him, "Don't say too much. You know, put your head down, respect the team, respect the opponent, respect the game." And that's what Willie Mays always believed in. He always, you know, took that road. But, you know, Jackie, different dude, and, you know, we love him because of it. He was the right guy in 47. Even Jackie was told by Branch Rickey not to say anything for 2 years. Not until 49 could he fight back, be aggressive, and be the player, show his personality, be the player he was. But Willie, who was always the player he was, maybe he wasn't, you know, didn't say the things, didn't preach, didn't march. So Jackie kind of ripped him in a 1964 book. It was an oral history of the history of integration in baseball. And he spoke with a number of players from the time, white and black, and they all weighed in on their stories. But Willie said, "No, I don't want to do it." And Jackie was pretty harsh in the book, kind of condemning him. "Wouldn't we love to hear from the young Mays?" And the words hurt Willie. And so that's all I knew going into this. So I said, man, I gotta find out if all that's true. I gotta do the research. I gotta talk to as many people as I can to find out if Willie Mays did not do enough for the African American cause in the civil rights movement. And I heard just the opposite, speaking with Joe Morgan and Frank Robinson and Maury Wills and Reggie Jackson, even Hank Aaron, who's 3 years younger. They all had stories about how pivotal Willie Mays was. Maybe not publicly, but privately. And of course, you know, he led by example. The images. I spoke with presidents for this book. I spoke with more than 200 people. You know, Negro League teammates and childhood buddies, and Hall of Famers. You know, almost 3 dozen. And I spoke with Bill Clinton, and Clinton was instrumental in the civil rights movement. He remembers it, and he talks about Willie Mays. He says, you know, just a wonderful quote. He said, you know, how outrageous and ludicrous it was for anybody, you know, to be a racist and follow Willie Mays the way they did and cheer for Willie Mays. And it all makes sense, you know. Why am I a racist? Yet I'm rooting for this man. And Willie kind of, you know, opened eyes and opened minds. And Clinton talks about the indelible images that we're seeing from the great Mays. And so anyway, you know, Morgan and Jackson and Wills and all these folks, Bob Kendrick over at the Negro League Museum, they all shared wonderful stories about how Mays actually was influential during that time and did so much for so many people. Joe Morgan talked about how Mays told him to leave the game better than he found it. Just simple stuff like that, but in greater detail. You know, May tells a story about Mays inviting the young Joe Morgan over to his house, spending a whole day, and then, you know, Joe leaving with all these shirts and golf clubs and all these things that Willie, you know, from all these sporting goods distributors, you know, just to hand out. And Willie's whole thing is he learned from his father, the Negro League teammates, Monty Irvin, his first roommate with the New York Giants, Negro League legend and Hall of Famer. And he might have been the first guy to break the color barrier, but it was actually Jackie. So Willie always kind of wanted to hand it down to the next generation and wanted that generation to, you know, pass it forward and you know, the whole cycle continue of, you know, how to act, how to be, how to respect. And it's pretty powerful stuff when Willie Mays is telling me this, and I had the honor to put it in print, and the access he gave me was just unparalleled.
Yeah, it comes through in the book, and you know, speaking of the president, he did receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom a few years ago from Obama. When Obama was president, and brought a lot of his old teammates and friends from throughout his life to the event. People that nobody ever heard of, you know, who are in this circle, to share that honor with him. So yeah, and that comes through the book. Each one, like I said, each one of these chapters is another lesson of how to be, how to live life. And I think, as you said, he lived it, he says it, and he lived it. And I think people will hopefully appreciate that when they read the book. And so there are some wonderful tales and stories in there. And again, if you compare it to today's world, he gave a glove. You want to tell that story from the catch. You know, I mean,
yeah, you know,
that would be in some auction house. You know?
The glove he used to make the catch in Game 1 of the '54 series off of Vic Wertz's bat. You know, you talk about these stories. The stories told in this book, we made sure that no quotes or anything anyone ever said in the past by Willie or about Willie would be used for this book. So it's 100% new, exclusive, fresh stuff. It's all new storytelling from the people who were there and the people who followed him and loved him. But the catch, you know, Game 1, the mighty Cleveland Indians, heavy favorites, beat the Giants. 111 wins, great pitching staff, good offense, explosive team. But it's 2-2 in the 8th inning of Game 1 at the Polo Grounds, and Vic Wertz with a couple guys on base, Larry Doby and Al Rosen, hits a ball a country mile, and Mays takes off, and we talked about the catch, but it was like 6.5 seconds from the time that The ball left Wirtz's bat till the time Willie actually let go of the ball. And that time, luckily, is captured on black and white film because that meant so much in American history to everybody in and out of the game. I mean, the beginning of black and white TV, the first African American superstar. The world was changing. The baby boomers coming up, and seeing a new brand of baseball. And there was Mays, racing to the future and making the play and throwing the ball. Completes the journey. Our dreams come true. So anyway, it was momentum for a Giants sweep. The Giants 1-4 over the mighty Indians. But so anyway, back then they didn't used to give away game-used jerseys or game-used bats or game-used gloves. Nobody knew the value of that stuff. It's just, hey, when you're done with it, toss it. So the following summer, Don Little, his teammate, who threw the pitch that Wirtz hit, little left-hander. Anyway, he had a kid, Craig Little, and they were on an airplane together, and Willie overheard that the kid asked the dad, say, hey, man, I want to play Little League next year. I'm inspired. And so the next day in the clubhouse, they're in St. Louis, Mays gives the glove to Don Little to give to the kid. The glove that he used to make the catch of the Vic Wirtz blast in the 54 series, because he kept it and used it, and now he didn't need it anymore. So what am I going to do? Sell it? Nobody buys that stuff. Throw it. Hey, a kid needs a glove. So I got a glove. Give him the glove. So anyway, the kid has the glove, Craig Little. And it's just a great story. He uses it for Little League, puts it up in the closet, leaves it out in the rain, all the things kids would do with the glove, right? Then goes to high school, goes to college. Now he's in his 20s and realized, I got something pretty famous. So he calls the Hall of Fame and says, hey, I'd like to donate this glove, or I'd like to give it to you guys on loan. He said, oh, man, hey, you got no proof. That's not Willie's glove. So Willie actually came out and said that, hey, that's the glove. I gave it to the Little family, and this is Craig Little, and he's got my glove. So the Hall of Fame said, oh, my God, okay, we'll take it on loan. And the Hall of Fame really has nothing else that they take on loan. Everything there they own. This is one thing they say, okay, Willie's glove, we'll make an exception. So it's been there in Cooperstown on display, and Don Little is no longer with us. Craig Little is no longer with us. So I spoke with Craig's wife, Terry Little, who opened up a drawer and found all these wonderful notes that Craig left her, just in case somebody would be calling about maybe a Willie Mays book. And she just had wonderful stories and told the tale of the glove and said, you know what, because I told her, I said, hey, you could get a small fortune with that. Take it back, sell it, buy a house. Right. And she, no, I don't want it in somebody's living room. I want it so everybody could see. That was Craig Little's wish, and I'm living up to that. So it's just a real neat story. And what Willie says about it is, it was just another example of me giving stuff away. A kid wanted a glove. I had one. Here you go.
No, you see it throughout his life, and you really see it throughout the book, whether it's the right attitude, strive for excellence, anything is possible. But I think the last chapter there you had was stay young at heart. And I think he's always been that. You can just see it whenever you see him. I met him once at the store, and just a sweet man. And I have a signed Willie Mays baseball. That's the only thing that I've collected. And like I said before, people have had the privilege of watching his career over the years, and those who haven't, sorry again for your loss, because that was just amazing. And I watched Mantle and Mays and Snyder and all those others in that era, and he was just really special. I mean, some of them were special too, but he was just really special.
We say sorry for your loss, and what Willie Mays, because most people, in this country did not see him play. We've gotten so far beyond his career that, most of the people in the country, weren't around when he played. He retired in 1973. So what he wanted to do with this book is not just tell his story, but tell the stories of those he played with. those he learned from, those he inspired, so that, this generation would know, because, his whole thing, we're at the 100-year anniversary of the Negro Leagues.
Right.
There's a whole chapter on him talking about the Negro Leagues, how important it is for kids today to know that happened and why that happened and how that should never happen again. Isolated people over here because of the color of their skin, forget all that. So there's so many, especially with what's going on in society, it's so relevant, his stories. And, the movement and the push for equality today, and everything that's going on in the world and in this country, it seems, he's just telling tales that will maybe help somebody go down the right road, which is the road he took.
Right. Yeah, it comes across in the book really well. He did a great job. It was really a quick and easy read, good read. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking at your bookshelf there. There are quite a few books there that I think I've read or.
Yeah. Well, this is Willie's time. And this was my favorite book up until now, right? This is Charles Einstein, who knew Willie very well, and this is just a classic book that I always loved. And there's 5 chapters, and woven within the chapters are the 5 presidencies from his time as a player. So it's about society, it's about baseball. And I said, well, let me take that a step further. Let me actually talk to presidents. And so I spoke with George W. Bush. I spoke with Bill Clinton, who were the first 2 baby boomer presidents, and told me their favorite player of all time is Willie Mays, right. And here's why. And a whole chapter on Barack Obama, because Willie's telling me, consider me born in Westfield, Alabama, and now I befriend a man in the White House who's a president with the same skin color, and he's inviting me onto Air Force One to go to the All-Star game in St. Louis. My, how times have changed. Right. Still need more change, but for Willie to tell that story just gives me chills. And I just felt, I felt honored and privileged and all that, but I just put it on a tee for Willie and let him swing away and got out of the way, because his stories are so valuable and important and powerful. And it was just wonderful to express these in the pages that we did.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's really a great book. It really is. And it highlights him really well. And hopefully, if we ever return to normalcy, you can come next spring training into the store, and maybe if Willie's around, we can do it the right way in person.
Heck yeah. I mean, Willie's got a place in North Scottsdale.
Yeah.
He goes to every home game during spring training. I was there this spring with him every day in the clubhouse. He's there, right. Accessible to players and coaches and fans, the media. And you don't say that too much about other Hall of Famers, but he's always there because he's a kid at heart. He loves the game. He's a Shea kid, and aptly named, as Roger Angel told me. And it's still that way today. I've been at his house a few times since the book came out, and we're it's always, okay, Willie, I'll be there for an hour or two, and it's always 5, 6, 7 hours, and it's just a blast. People coming and going, socially distanced, of course, but just the fun factor and the high level of passion and joyful exuberance that he had as a kid and still today. It's just really unbelievable.
All right. That's terrific to hear. It really is. And I really appreciate your time today. Do we have any no questions?
No, just a lot of people watching,
Good.
but no real questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, John, we really appreciate your time. Do you have anything else you'd like to?
Well, that's a good question. There's so many layers. The audiobook, Bob Costas wrote the foreword, and Bob Costas read the foreword, and I always thought and knew he was just a wonderful announcer. But then I received a manuscript that he wrote for the foreword. I said, oh my God, this is just a wonderful writer, and why wouldn't he be? So it's you know, speaking with more than 200 people and interviewing Willie. We did the math for more than 100 hours for this project. You know, the access he gave me was more than any other Willie book that's ever been written. And the great thing about it is, like I said, there's no need for a bibliography. You know, other Willie Mays books, 30, 35, 40 pages of bibliography, you know, taken from other books that were taken from other books that were taken from other books, you know, and I have a few of them. And I said, you know, I know all those stories. I want new stories. I want Maury Wills and Hank Aaron and you know, Bill Greason, his old Negro League teammate, and Mays himself, and McCovey, and you know, Frank Robinson, and Mike Trout, and Buster Posey, and all these fellas today to weigh in and tell their stories about. Because everybody seems to have a Willie Mays story. I talk about Clinton and Bush. I mean, you know, Clinton from Arkansas, 10 years old, his parents buy a black and white TV, and one of the first images is Willie running across the screen. And then he's in the White House, invites Willie over, and they become golf partners and good buddies. And George W. Bush, same thing, Midland, Texas. He's about the same age when his uncle Bucky from Connecticut takes him to the Polo Grounds, first major league game, and his first you know, image is Willie Mays running across the field. And then he becomes a president, invites Willie to the White House, and they become buddies. You know, he played ball. His dad was a really good ball player, and so, you know, baseball. In politics, you know, you can never say stick to sports, right? Because it all matters. And Willie doesn't say, I want a Democrat, I want a Republican. His words to me is, I want a president in there who's got a good heart for kids. And I said, oh my God, okay. And that's what really matters to him. He goes to the White House, but it's on the level of, okay, what are we doing for kids? What are we going to be doing? You know, and then Obama, of course, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And he visited the place 3 or 4 times because the Giants kept winning championships, and he was there front and center, you know, during the big picture situation. So the White House is like his second home. He's been there many times, and you know, he's got stories of like the last 9 presidents at his house. You know, you go down his hallway and all these wonderful pictures. Oh my God, there's Willie and Nixon, and there's, you know, Willie and Ford, and there's Willie and Reagan. He knew Reagan before Reagan was a president. He knew him when he was an actor because of Leo DeRocher and the connection to Hollywood. But man, you mentioned anybody to Willie Mays, and he's got a story. And then everybody else got a story about Willie Mays. So it's like, you know, this could have been volumes and volumes and volumes. But I think we're happy with how it came out.
Well, you know, they used to say about, you know, stars and famous that had a certain magnetism. I think that's what he has. He has magnetism, drawing people to him and accepting him for who they are and what they are. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Well, he had his own style too. You know, you talk about today's game, and they're trying to, you know, do away with the unwritten rules. Well, Willie celebrated the game maybe a little more than others back then. You know, and we're still talking about, should you celebrate? Should you rub it in? Should you disrespect your opponent? Well, Willie Mays was so beloved that he was cheered at Ebbets Field, the Dodger Stadium. He was cheered at Dodger Stadium in L.A., the old L.A. Coliseum, wherever the Dodgers played. He went there and he was cheered. He wasn't booed by Dodger fans, so he wasn't booed by anybody.
Right.
The Giants led the league in road attendance in the 60s. They had wonderful ball players, but they all told me it was because of Mays. People showed up everywhere to check out that guy, but his style and the entertainment and the basket catch, right? And you know, everything that Willie was the epitome of, you know, class and character, but also style. And you know, Vince Scully told me in the book, he says, was he a showman? Yeah, maybe a little, but it was his way of saying, God, I love this game.
Yeah, that comes through. Yeah, it wasn't a showman. He was just joy. Just having a good time, playing the game. Yeah, absolutely. You don't see enough of it in today's world, but you know, that's the 21st century right now, and hopefully it gets a little better. Okay, I don't have any other questions, and hopefully, like I said, we can do it. Spring training, the world returns to normal, and we're only about 5-6 blocks from the stadium.
Indeed.
And they're doing a lot of work on it, a lot of renovation over there. So, and And it is a beautiful little park, it really is. The Scottsdale
Oh,
Stadium.
I know writers and players from all 30 teams, and I think if anyone could take a pick, they'd always say, "Man, I'd like to have spring training in Scottsdale."
Yeah.
You know, from the establishments at night to the the museums to the art to just the beauty of downtown and the ballpark right there.
Right.
You know, I'm fortunate to cover a team that where I could stay in Scottsdale instead of some of these other cities in Florida that will remain nameless.
Yes, right, exactly. Well, again, I thank you for your time, and hopefully, it's a difficult year to have a book come out because, again, limited ability to promote it. But hopefully it does well, and it's again a great book and a great read, and really highlights just a real legend. Not too many people can wear that title well, but Willie Mays can, and you did a really great job in putting that out. So congratulations.
Well, that's so well said, and I appreciate you caring about this and reading it. Obviously, you know so much about Mays, so it's really an honor to speak with someone who saw him play,
Yes.
and not at the end of his career with the Mets, but all the way back to the New York Giant days. Because
I was at the
yeah,
Ball
like,
Grounds for a Dodger Giant rivalry game. Scariest night of my life. Was being there between the Giant fans and Dodger fans in the same ballpark. It was scary. But anyway,
yeah, Vince Scully told me, he said, I had to say a prayer every day just to make sure nobody would get hurt every time he walked to the ballpark before a Giant Dodger game, because they fought all the time.
Yeah.
There were no there were no ejections.
Right.
The umpires just let them go like a hockey game.
Yeah.
And they fought and then they played, and but Mays, he had friends among all the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Junior Gillum was like his best buddy, the infielder with the Dodgers, and Newcomb and Campanella. He used to hang with those guys and other folks as well. But that was just him. He seemed to love everybody. People loved him, and it didn't matter if you were a rival or a foe. Or Maury Will said, he'd slide into you, he'd knock you down, but you would still love him.
Yeah. No, he's a true legend. So good luck with the book, and
Well, thanks.
hopefully I'll get to see you in the spring. So take care.
Okay, thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. It was an honor.
Likewise.